If you were to walk into literally any business school, or maybe even just a crowded bar, and ask people what the 3 most important rules of real estate are, you are going to get the exact same answer.
Oh, yeah, it's practically a reflex at this point.
Right.
Location, location, location.
Exactly. Is the oldest cliche in the book.
It's the absolute mantra of the industry.
And for decades, nobody really questioned it because it was objectively true. I mean, you couldn't argue with it.
No, you couldn't.
But today, we are jumping into a deep dive on some really fascinating source material. We've got a stack of research focused on the narrative economy, specifically the new rules of real estate value.
And it argues that this old wisdom isn't just getting a bit tired.
Right.
It's actually becoming dangerous to rely on.
It's dangerous. Yeah, the core thesis here is that we have crossed this threshold where the actual physical ground beneath your feet matters less than the story you wrap around it.
Which is a huge claim to make.
It's massive. I mean,
Yeah.
it basically suggests that the map is no longer the territory.
But when you start looking at the data on how modern value is actually created, it completely holds up.
It does.
We are seeing this fundamental tectonic shift from real estate being a game of physical distribution to a game of narration.
A game of narration. So the shift from distribution to narration, that's really the headline for today.
Yes.
But before we get into the nuts and bolts of how that actually works, I want to challenge this idea that location doesn't matter. Because, come on, a beachfront villa is always going to be worth more than a shack in the middle of a desert.
Sure.
You can't just, story tell your way out of a terrible neighborhood.
Well, actually, you kind of can. And developers do it all the time.
Really?
Yeah. But let's be really precise here. The sources aren't saying geography is totally irrelevant.
Okay.
It's that geography is no longer the primary driver of premium value. The text uses a really specific term for this.
Narrative infrastructure.
Exactly. Narrative infrastructure.
Let's unpack that because it sounds a little bit like corporate buzzword soup at first glance.
It does sound like a buzzword.
What does that actually mean in practice for, someone listening right now?
Think about it this way. Imagine you have 2 identical brick warehouses.
Okay, 2 warehouses.
Same square footage, same distance from the highway, same year they were built.
Got it.
One of them is marketed simply as industrial storage space. It's got a totally standard sign out front, and that's literally it.
Yeah, standard bare bones listing.
Right. Now take the second warehouse. It's branded as an innovation hub for the creator economy.
Oh, I see where this is going.
It comes with this whole backstory about the building's industrial heritage. It has a vision for the community inside, and maybe there's a really slick digital rendering of what it could look like as a studio space.
And the zoning hasn't changed at all.
The zoning hasn't changed. The bricks haven't moved an inch. But that innovation hub is commanding double the rent of the storage space.
Double the rent for the exact same physical asset.
Exactly. Why?
Because the intent changed. Like, you aren't just renting a place to put boxes anymore. You're renting space for ideas.
You nailed it. The source material calls this a transformation of intent.
Transformation of intent.
Right. Because in today's economy, we have a massive surplus of physical space, especially with all the shifts we're seeing in commercial real estate right now.
Oh, for sure. Empty offices everywhere.
So the scarcity isn't the roof over your head. The scarcity is meaning.
Meaning. That's deep, but it makes total sense. If you're just selling the bricks, the square footage, the parking spots, you are strictly competing on price.
Which is a terrible place to be.
It's a race to the bottom. There is always going to be a cheaper warehouse just a mile down the road.
Correct. You have become a commodity.
Right.
But if you are selling the narrative infrastructure, the story of what actually happens inside those bricks, you are now competing on value.
And value has a much higher ceiling than price.
Infinitely higher. And this brings us to the biggest casualty of this new economy, which the author savagely critiques in the text.
Yes, the list and pray model.
The death of list and pray.
Which I see constantly. List and pray is basically the standard operating procedure for what, 90% of the industry?
Easily 90%.
You get a listing, you take some decent photos, maybe you even spring for the cool drone shot.
Right, the drone shot is mandatory now.
Yeah, and then you throw it on the big aggregator sites, and then you just wait.
You wait for the phone to ring. And historically, we really have to remember that this worked.
It did work.
It worked because of information asymmetry. Think about 20 years ago. The broker literally had the book of listings.
Right. They had the physical binder.
If a buyer wanted to know what was for sale in their town, they had to call you. You controlled the distribution.
You were the gatekeeper.
Exactly. But now,
Now we have Zillow, LoopNet, Redfin. Distribution is completely free.
it's free and instant.
It's literally in my pocket right now.
Right. Distribution has been totally demonetized. Everyone has access to everything all the time.
So just being seen isn't a competitive advantage anymore.
Not at all. In fact, the source argues that in a world of infinite noise, silence is actually a financial liability.
That is a heavy phrase. Silence is a liability.
It is.
It implies that if you aren't actively broadcasting a narrative, you aren't just staying neutral, you are actively losing money.
You are. Because if you aren't telling the story, the market is going to assign one to you.
Oh, wow.
And usually the default story the market assigns to a silent asset is distressed or stale or commodity.
Okay, so let's get into the actual psychological mechanism here. Why does narrative translate into actual dollars?
Well, it comes down to behavioral psychology.
The text mentions that familiarity breeds trust, which honestly sounds like a platitude we've all heard a million times.
So it does sound basic.
But they apply it to high-stakes decision-making in a really specific way.
It's critical. Real estate is almost always a high-stakes transaction. We're talking high cost, high risk.
Yeah?
And when humans make high-risk decisions, we are evolutionarily wired to be extremely risk-averse.
We don't like strangers.
Exactly. Strangers represent danger to the primitive brain.
So we look for safety signals. We look for something we already recognize.
Right. And in the digital age, safety looks like familiarity. And here is the really scary stat for the list and pray crowd.
Let's hear it.
The source suggests that in modern asset management, the hiring decision is often finalized months before a formal pitch ever happens.
Okay, that's the part that really stood out to me in the reading. We tend to think the pitch meeting is where the battle is won.
The traditional boardroom showdown.
Right. You put on the nice suit, you bring the shiny slide deck, you shake hands. But you're saying the war is actually already over by the time I walk into that room.
In many cases, yes. It is entirely over.
Oh.
If you are a property owner looking for someone to handle a $50 million asset, you are doing your homework online first.
Of course you are.
You are reading articles, you're watching market breakdowns, you're looking for real thought leadership. And if you find someone who clearly seems to understand the market better than you do, you have essentially mentally hired them before you even send the initial email.
And if you're the other guy, the one who just cold called them on a Tuesday and said, hey, I can sell your building,
You're fighting a losing battle.
you've already lost the mandate, as the text puts it.
You are trying to build trust from absolute zero in a 1-hour meeting. The other person has been building trust with them for 6 months through their content.
It's not a fair fight at all.
No.
Nah.
Which leads us perfectly into a concept the source calls the film effect.
I love this part. I'm a huge movie buff, and I've actually seen this happen in real life.
It's a great metaphor.
A neighborhood is completely ignored,
Right.
then a hit TV show or a big movie films there, and suddenly it's the coolest place on earth.
We see it all the time. It's the Monuments Men effect or the Sex and the City effect with those brownstones in New York.
Right. The physical location didn't change. The plumbing in those brownstones is still 100 years old.
The streets are still the exact same width, but the overlay changed.
The overlay. The quote from the text here is just great. The location didn't change overnight. The story did.
And that is the purest definition of narrative infrastructure. It's about successfully layering a cultural premium on top of a physical asset.
So if you can convince the market that a building is historic or it's innovative or super exclusive, the actual math changes.
Exactly. Because you aren't paying for shelter anymore, you're paying for identity.
But here is where I want to push back a little bit, just to play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
The film effect is usually accidental, right? You can't just decide that HBO is going to shoot their next prestige drama in your lobby next week.
True, you can't control HBO.
So how does a regular professional, someone who isn't a Hollywood producer, actually manufacture this kind of narrative value?
That is the million-dollar question right there. And the answer the author gives is that you have to stop acting like a traditional salesperson and start acting like a producer. And this brings us to what the source calls the death of persuasion.
Thank God for that, honestly. I think we are all pretty sick of the hard sell, the whole always be closing mindset.
We are completely immune to it now. We smell a sales script a mile away.
Yep.
In an era where we have infinite information at our fingertips, we don't need you to persuade us that a building is good.
No, because I can just look up the comps myself.
Yeah.
I can see the local crime stats. I can check the transaction history.
Exactly. So the source argues that you need to shift your strategy from persuasion to something called proof stacking.
Proof stacking sounds very technical, almost like a legal strategy or something you'd hear in a courtroom.
It is actually very similar to building a legal case. You are essentially building a credibility ecosystem.
A credibility ecosystem.
Right. Instead of trying to convince a client you're good in the moment of the pitch, you create an environment where your competence is undeniable before they ever even speak to you.
Okay, the text breaks this down into 5 specific layers of the stack. I really want to go through these one by one because they seem super practical, not just theoretical.
Let's do it.
So the first layer is search visibility.
But let's be really clear here. This isn't just basic SEO.
It's not just keyword stuffing.
No.
Right.
It's not about ranking for generic terms like real estate agent in Chicago. It is about answering the specific high-intent questions that the market is actually asking.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, say a developer Googles adaptive reuse trends for industrial warehouses in the Midwest.
Very specific.
Very specific. And if your article pops up answering that, you aren't just a search result to them. You are a resource.
You've answered a specific question. So it's visibility plus utility.
Right. You are helpful before you are hired.
If you aren't the answer to their question, you effectively don't exist.
You don't.
Okay, layer 2 is digital press. This feels like social proof on steroids.
It's third-party validation, which is huge. It is the difference between you saying, I'm an expert, and Forbes or a major industry journal quoting you as an expert.
One is a claim, the other's a fact.
Exactly. In a trust-based economy, having that as seen in banner on your site does a lot of heavy lifting.
It signals to the subconscious, someone else vetted this person, so I don't have to.
Precisely. It shortcuts the trust-building process.
Layer 3 is educational content. And I assume this means a lot more than just writing a blog post about 5 tips for first-time homebuyers.
Oh, absolutely. The source emphasizes what they call niche intelligence.
Niche intelligence.
It's about explaining the why behind the market movements. If you can explain to a client why fluctuating interest rates are impacting cap rates in their specific neighborhood.
Or why a new zoning law is going to fundamentally change their property value.
Yes. If you can do that, you aren't a transaction coordinator anymore. You are an analyst. You are a consultant.
Which dovetails perfectly into layer 4. Niche specialization. This feels like the classic riches and niches argument.
It is, but applied specifically to authority and narrative. You cannot be the narrative king of everything.
Right.
You can't own the story for luxury downtown condos and industrial warehouses and rural farmland all at once.
It's just not believable.
It's not.
Yeah.
You have to pick a lane. You need to own a territory, whether that's geographic or an asset class, so deeply that you become the absolute default authority.
So when people think medical office buildings in Seattle, they need to automatically think of you.
Exactly.
And finally, layer 5. Case studies.
But again, not just those just sold postcards everyone sends out.
Yeah, those just end up in the recycling bin.
Because they are just vanity metrics. A proof stack case study is a transformation story. It needs a real narrative arc.
Like a before and after.
Right. Here was the problem. The building was empty and totally dilapidated. Here was our narrative strategy. We rebranded it as a creative loft. And here was the result record price per square foot.
It proves the process, not just the outcome.
It shows them how your mind works.
So when you stack all these up, visibility, press, education, specialization, and case studies, you create this ecosystem. The text says the ultimate goal is to shift the client conversation from why should I hire you to when can we start?
That is the big pivot. You stop chasing business and you start attracting it. You become the inevitable choice.
Now, obviously, this requires a completely different skill set. If you're spending your time writing deep dive articles and filming videos, you aren't making 100 cold calls a day.
Right.
The text describes this as a shift from being a negotiator to an interpreter of change.
I really like this framing from the author. The negotiator of the past was essentially a warrior.
Right, fighting for every penny.
Their whole value was in the battle fighting for the best price at the closing table. But today, the price is largely dictated by algorithms and data.
The comps are public.
The comps are public, so the interpreter of change is more of a strategist.
They're the ones connecting the dots for the client.
Right. They sit right at the intersection of the physical space, the narrative, and where the audience's attention is actually going.
And the ultimate example the source gives here, which I think is brilliant, is Las Vegas.
Las Vegas is the perfect case study for this.
Because on paper, Las Vegas is a total disaster. It makes absolutely no sense.
It's a terrible idea for a city. It's in the middle of a brutal desert. There is no water, no port, no natural resources.
Geographically, it should not exist. It produces nothing tangible.
Nothing.
And yet, it is a massive economic powerhouse.
Because it understands the narrative economy better than literally any city on Earth.
Yeah.
Las Vegas is built entirely on the principle that capital follows attention.
Capital follows attention.
No.
And they don't just tell one story. They completely change the story every 10 years or so.
Relentless reinvention. It started as Sin City, gambling, mobsters, a little bit of danger and risk. That was the initial narrative infrastructure. Then in the 90s, they realized American families had a lot of disposable income, so it became Disney in the desert.
I totally remember that era. Treasure Island, the pirate ship shows on the Strip.
Theme parks, the MGM Lion, magic shows.
Yeah.
But then they realized that was getting a bit tacky and aging out, so they pivoted again to what happens here stays here.
Adult freedom, the massive nightclubs, the luxury dining.
Exactly. And look at it today. It's pivoting yet again to become a global sports and entertainment capital. They brought in Formula One. They hosted the Super Bowl.
It's honestly exhausting just thinking about managing that kind of shift.
It is exhausting, but that is exactly the job of the interpreter of change. If Las Vegas had just stuck to the Sin City narrative from the 1950s, it would be a ghost town today.
The narrative would have gone totally stale.
The attention would have shifted elsewhere, and the capital would have fled.
So the lesson for the listener, whether you own a massive skyscraper or just a duplex, is that you can't just set the story once and walk away.
Never. Visibility creates the initial value, but relevance is what sustains it over time.
Relevant.
You have to constantly decode the cultural shifts and adjust your narrative infrastructure to match what the market currently values.
This all sounds incredibly sophisticated, but I do want to ground it a bit.
Yeah.
Because is this just high-level philosophy, or is this actionable science?
It's highly actionable.
Because the source material mentions something called the frontier, a real-time experiment they are actually running.
Yes, this is the Local Spaces Project. And I really appreciate this inclusion because usually business books just give you the grand theory and send you on your way.
Good luck figuring it out.
Right. But this author is saying, okay, let's rigorously test it. They are running a live 90-day controlled experiment.
What exactly are they testing in this?
They are trying to quantify the narrative lift. They are looking at very specific variables to see real-world impact. For instance, does writing deep dive niche intelligence articles actually lower the time it takes to close a deal?
Oh, so that's a highly measurable metric.
Yeah.
Days on market.
Right. And they're testing the conversion power of digital press. Does having that as seen in logo on your landing page actually make people sign listing agreements faster?
Yeah, what else?
Perhaps most interestingly, they are testing the narrative lift of video storytelling specifically for commercial assets.
So, does a high-production video that tells the emotional or historical story of a building actually increase its final sale price?
The current hypothesis is a strong yes. The whole goal of the experiment is to move the industry beyond the hustle, grinding for every single lead, and move toward a systematic approach where your media is driving the asset appreciation.
It's essentially making the media do the heavy lifting for you.
Which, when you're operating in an economy of totally fractured attention, is really the only scalable way to grow.
Because you can't physically cold call everyone in the market.
No, but your narrative can reach everyone, 24/7.
Wow. So let's zoom out and look at the big picture here as we wrap up. We have moved from this old world of location, location, location to a completely new world of narrative, narrative, narrative.
We have.
We've seen how list and pray is effectively dead, and it's being replaced by proof stacking. What is the one core thing you want the listener to take away from this deep dive?
For me, it all comes back to the supply and demand of meaning. We are living in an era of infinite supply. There are a million buildings, there are a million real estate professionals, there are a million different investment opportunities.
And to a buyer, they all look exactly the same on a spreadsheet.
Precisely. The commodities are abundant. What is scarce is the story. The value of a physical space is no longer intrinsic to the bricks themselves. It is dictated by the story you tell about those bricks.
And the warning in the text was pretty stark on this point. manage the narrative or be managed by the market.
That is the absolute danger zone. If you are passive, if you rely on silence, the market is going to assign you the lowest possible value.
It will assume you are just another commodity.
Exactly. Visibility and narrative are the only currencies that don't depreciate over time.
Think about that.
The roof of your building will eventually leak. The broader real estate market will eventually crash. But your authority, your narrative, that stays with you.
It really fundamentally changes how you look at the profession. You aren't really in the real estate business anymore, are you?
No, you're in the media business. The physical asset is just the topic of your conversation.
That is a huge paradigm shift. And it might take a minute to really digest. It puts a lot of pressure on the professional to really step up their game.
It does require a step up, but it also opens up massive opportunity because right now, so few people are doing this well.
Because most people are still stuck listing and praying.
Exactly. The opportunity lies in the untold story.
Always. Well, we have covered a ton of ground today. From the death of old sales models to the psychology of trust, all the way to the relentless reinvention of Las Vegas.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But it's clear that the narrative economy isn't just some marketing buzzword. It really is the new operating system for value.
It absolutely is. And the winners are going to be the ones who learn to speak this new language before the rest of the market catches up.
So, we will leave you with this final thought to chew on. We spend so much time and money managing our physical assets, fixing the HVAC, painting the walls, balancing the spreadsheets. But if your professional value is no longer determined by your balance sheet, but by the authority of your voice, how are you managing the narrative of your own career right now?
That is the real question.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.